This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The World Health Organization warns about lifting restrictions as COVID-19 cases approach the 2 million mark globally. We take stock of how African countries have been dealing with the coronavirus pandemic, and how players in the tourism sector in South Africa are deploying technology to counter lockdown conditions. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Searle-Ntal, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at other stories making headlines this hour. What authorities in Africa are doing to keep small businesses afloat due in the wake of coronavirus disruptions. And find out why mass polio immunization campaigns are being stopped in Nigeria. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. Let's begin with the latest on the COVID-19 pandemic. The number of confirmed cases worldwide is approaching 1.7 million. Over 102,000 people have died. The U.S. has become the first country to report over 2,000 deaths in just one day. Cases there have risen to 500,000, more than a quarter of the worldwide total. Meanwhile, nearly half of all cases are in Europe, with Spain and Italy the worst hit. Iran, the epicenter in the Middle East, has registered more than 68,000 infections. The Chinese mainland reported 46 new cases on Friday. China's northeastern border city of Suifenhe is facing the challenge of imported coronavirus cases from neighboring Russia. A key frontier port of Heilongjiang province, Suifenhe has important cross-border rail and road links. Authorities in Suifenhe have since shut down the border crossing and ordered a lockdown of communities in the city. Guanyang reports.
Since the 11th of March, 2,497 people entered China through the border crossing in Suifenhe. Many of these travelers are Chinese nationals who work for small businesses in Russia. They came by plane from Moscow to Vladivostok, then crossed the border at Suifenhe. The situation now is getting better in terms of medical capacity to cope with the imported COVID-19 cases here. Virus testing capacity increased to 600 per day from 96. The county has prepared 600 hospital beds to treat COVID-19 patients, up from 17 previously. I'm right now at the newly converted hospital, which is 15 minutes drive from the county center. This hospital will be used to treat asymptomatic patients only if the city runs out of facilities to deal with future imported cases. So this means the newly converted hospital will not start operation until it is necessary. And in terms of the confirmed COVID-19 cases, depends on their physical conditions. Several hospitals in the city of Mudanjiang, which is 2 hours drive from Suifenhe and has a population of 2.5 million, they're prepared, they've called on duty. Obviously, the hospital over there have more medical equipment and more experienced doctors and nurses. For now, the People's Hospital in Suifenhe, together with this one here, only receive asymptomatic patients. As we speak, more than 200 medical workers from other cities in Heilongjiang province have all arrived at the front line, and the more clinical equipment and the medical supplies are on their way.
Egypt has confirmed 95 new COVID-19 cases and 17 new deaths. This is the smallest figure of new infections the North African country has recorded in a week. While the country enters its third week of partial lockdown, Cairo is expecting the number of COVID-19 cases to increase in the coming weeks. CGTN's Adel Al-Makroui tells us more.
Egypt announced 95 new COVID-19 cases on Friday night. It's the lowest number of infections reported in a week, but that doesn't mean the virus is slowing down. On the same day, the disease has claimed the highest number of lives yet, 17 deaths according to the official health ministry statement. The total number of infections since the outbreak has risen to 1,794, pushing Egypt up to become the second highest African nation with the disease after South Africa. For weeks, Egypt has been in Africa's third position in the COVID-19 cases list, following Algeria. The government is warning the figures will rise in the coming weeks. Egypt is imposing a 10-hour night curfew to limit the infection rate. With exception to gatherings in cafes and entertainment centers, life is mostly resuming normally. Experts believe Egypt will reach the peak of COVID-19 infections by June. That could be brought earlier to May if government regulations of social distancing and wearing preventive kits are not followed properly. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
It's been nearly 2 months since the first case of the coronavirus was reported in Africa. So far, over 690 people have died from the virus. The continent has also recorded over 2,000 recoveries. CGTN's Colette Wanjohi spoke to the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention on the challenges facing the continent.
Nearly all countries in Africa have so far recorded coronavirus cases. Currently, the number of infected has surpassed 12,000. The Africa CDC says this is worrying.
This means that the strategies that we are putting in place need to address the fact that we have local transmission and we also have community transmission that is going on. That is why the numbers are so big. So the continent is at a stage where Europe, for example, was some 6 weeks ago. So it is time that we did a lot more.
Lesotho and Comoros are yet to register any positive cases. The Africa CDC says it cannot be ruled out that they do not have any cases.
Their laboratory diagnosis capacity is still not where they can be able to test for COVID-19 in country, and that definitely slows down the ability to be able to get the cases and report. But we do hope still that if they are not reporting a case, then they don't have a case. We have systems in place that samples can be able to be taken from those countries to a neighboring country for testing, but nothing yet has been identified.
Since the epidemic began, the Africa CDC has distributed 60,000 test kits to member states and has procured 70,000 more from Germany. Transportation of the test kits to Africa is proving a challenge, with many countries around the world putting restrictions on international flights. Getting the kits here as fast as would have been expected is a hurdle. But there is also growing competition for the medical supplies.
The issue of tests remains a challenge because few companies are actually producing tests that we can be able to use in the laboratory. Because few companies are producing and many parts of the world are now getting the pressure of needing to test, it means that testing remains a challenge.
The Africa CDC says the massive lockdowns happening on the continent are key in enabling member states to implement massive screening and increased testing. Colette Wanjohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Let's now turn to South Africa. South Africa continues to have the highest number of confirmed cases on the continent. It has over 2,000 confirmed cases. The country has entered its second phase of lockdown, another 21 period of no business, no movement, and closed borders. CGTN's Angela Coppola looks back on the country's first lockdown.
Cyril Ramaphosa, the country's president, has been leading by example in his approach to combating the virus. His attention is now turned to the second lockdown.
Over the next 2 weeks, we will roll out the community screening and testing program across all provinces, focusing in particular on highly vulnerable communities.
The first lockdown set the boundaries and apparently limited the spread. The second will see how successfully the country deals with the next stage.
We hope that we will then be able to get everything in place for what we sadly do anticipate to be many more patients coming into hospitals.
Testing is critical, especially in the vulnerable communities, including the inner city and high-density inner city areas.
I mean, the overcrowding in Hillbrow is significant, and I agree. And I think I totally agree with you. It is a hotspot, and I think should be on the hotspot list, but it's not yet.
Until now, testing has been voluntary. That's about to change as between 10,000 and 20,000 healthcare workers start door-to-door testing. In neighboring Yeovil, there's a largely unemployed expat community who are worried.
I'm worried about my health. It's difficult for you to stay if you don't know what's happening in your life. You don't know maybe the disease will affect you, so it's better for us to be tested. As soon as we get the chance, we want to be tested.
It's been a month since the state of emergency was announced, and we've just heard about that extension of another 21 days. And the people on the streets are shell-shocked because they don't know how they're going to cope financially or emotionally. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Hillbrow, South Africa.
Well, staying in South Africa, mass community screening for the coronavirus has begun in some of Cape Town's most marginalized communities. CGTN's Travers Andrews has more.
With a population of more than 500,000 people, mass screenings for COVID-19 symptoms in the Khayelitsha township is no easy task that requires the compliance of many residents. But health workers here believe it's an important public health issue that just can't be ignored, and have so rolled out mass community screenings for symptoms of the virus.
Good to test rather than staying at home and ignoring it. This coronavirus, it's a reality, it's a true thing. There's a lot of challenges because some of them, they are scared, they don't know how we are going to screen. Some, they said they are scared. Some, they want to prove to them, they want to see this is a reality.
The Western Cape Department of Health has identified 7 areas where community screenings for COVID-19 are set to take place. Khayelitsha is just one of them. Residents are also being tested for the disease and will be isolated, monitored and even tracked should they come up positive with their results. Now, the density of Cape Town's informal townships have made compliance with national lockdown regulations very difficult for many people here. And that is why the government has placed such a pivotal importance on mass screenings. Kotabo Sakati, though, having himself screened not just gives him peace of mind, but assists in the national fight against the disease that has already affected thousands of families.
People want to screening. We heard there was a car that was driving around that's telling us there will be screening. But my problem with screening is that I'm not staying in this area. I'm staying in G section. This is another area. So as I'm on my way to the garage, I said I will come around, but I will expect they must go all the areas.
And that's likely to happen now that the national lockdown has been extended by President Cyril Ramaphosa, so that the country can deal the disease a fatal blow. And it is at community level like this where the battle can be won. Travers Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
South Sudan's government is asking for support from international donors to help the country strengthen its measures to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. There are now 4 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in South Sudan. CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports.
South Sudan's government has set up a task force to prevent the spread of COVID-19. It is headed by President Salva Kiir. The task force has ordered for closure of all businesses dealing in non-food items. It has also closed the country's borders and suspended all social gatherings.
I urge you to respect the and strictly follow the directives and advice of the task force. These measures are intended to protect rather than harm you. Each and every one of us has a duty to protect himself, herself, their families, and all their compatriots.
The World Health Organization ranks South Sudan as having one of the most underdeveloped health sectors in the world due to long years of civil war. There are also few health workers in the country, and Juba is asking for more support. South Sudan's health ministry says it is working to contain the spread of the coronavirus.
The Ministry of Health and partners, especially the World Health Organization and the UN system, have launched an outbreak investigation involving identification of contacts and possible testing of the contacts.
The United Nations says more than 180,000 South Sudanese people still live in tents only inches apart from one another in displaced people's camps. The displaced have limited access to health care, water, hygiene and food. South Sudan's government is now urging those still living in the displaced camps to voluntarily return to their own homes, adding that it would stop crowding at the camps and help in the fight against the spread of COVID-19. Patrick Koyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
As COVID-19 spreads across the continent, experts are worried about the potential strain on health sectors. The head of the World Health Organization also highlighted his concerns over how the coronavirus could affect rural health systems.
We have seen an alarming acceleration in other countries. I want to take a moment to highlight Africa, where we're seeing the spread of the virus to rural areas. We're now seeing clusters of cases and community spread in more than 16 countries. We anticipate severe hardship for already overstretched health systems, particularly in rural areas, which normally lack the resources of those in cities. I know that some countries are already planning the transition out of stay-at-home restrictions. WHO wants to see restrictions lifted as much as anyone. At the same time, lifting restrictions too quickly could lead to a deadly resurgence. The way down can be as dangerous as the way up if not managed properly.
Ethiopia's parliament has endorsed a 5-month state of emergency. So far, Ethiopia has confirmed 65 cases of the coronavirus. The state of emergency looks to stop the spread of the virus. The country's parliament will also form an emergency committee focused on fighting COVID-19.
The rate of spread globally and the health, economic and social impact, as well as the peace and security impacts that COVID-19 is introducing, stronger measures are deemed necessary at the national level, which have warranted this declaration of a state of emergency. Unlike previous state of emergencies, what makes this one particularly distinct is the prevailing factors under which it is being decreed, in that the crisis, one, is a health crisis brought on by a virus for which currently there is no vaccination. Two, the rate of transmission is fast and is not visible, hence can be predominant in certain geographic locations over others, or can equally affect all. And third is shifting our normal mode of operations, impacting livelihoods, altering the movement and everyday patterns that we have become used to.
On the day that Botswana's president announced an extension of 6 months to the country's lockdown, it emerged that one of the 13 new positive coronavirus cases is that of a health worker who was on duty at Wednesday's parliamentary sitting. Angela Coppola has more.
This follows a report by the Minister of Health and Wellness, Dr. Lebogang Kwape, on Thursday morning that 7 new cases of COVID-19 had in fact been registered in Botswana. Health professionals were advising Parliament on how they are to proceed at that point, considering that some of the members had in fact interacted with a healthcare worker. And then the bombshell, all MPs were in fact ordered to go into mandatory quarantine. Of course, some opposition leaders are wondering and questioning why MPs are given the choice to self-quarantine. Questions are also now being asked about how a healthcare worker could have actually been allowed to be on duty at Parliament if they'd already been tested for suspected infection. At the same time, President Masisi says he intends to use the 6-month declaration of a state of emergency to protect the Botswana against that decimating potential of the virus. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Somalia has recorded its first fatality less than 1 month after the country recorded its index case of COVID-19. So far, the country has 21 confirmed cases of the virus. From Mogadishu, CGTN's Abdulaziz Billah reports on how community transmission is overwhelming authorities in the Horn of Africa nation.
Somalia has recorded its first death since the outbreak of coronavirus last year. The victim is said to be a 58-year-old man with underlying medical conditions and no history of travel. Mogadishu mayor now says that the local city municipality will investigate recent deaths, with health officials attributing the country's recent coronavirus spike to community transmission.
COVID-19 is here with us. It has reached Mogadishu and community transmission has been reported. Many people are suffering as a result. I know of some people with no travel history that have died from it. The virus came and killed them here.
Health experts say that mass testing and investigating causes of death among recent victims will prove challenging, as the country has a weak health system. Earlier this week, the Ministry of Health announced the acquisition of a diagnostic lab and testing kits with support from the World Health Organization.
As a result of a weak health system, the government lacks capacity to confirm positive cases. The government cannot handle COVID-19 related cases. The health sector is already overwhelmed. Frontline health workers remain at risk due to limited knowledge of viral diseases.
Since the first case of COVID-19 was recorded in Somalia, authorities have enacted a number of measures, including a ban on local and international flights. Schools and other learning institutions also remain closed for close to a month now. However, mosques, hotels and restaurants still remain open. Experts say the country remains vulnerable to local transmission of the virus, with social gatherings at places of worship like mosques and community lifestyle in households expected to increase the spread.
The virus can easily be transmitted in the society based on our lifestyle. In every household, we have at least 5 or 6 people. If one contracts the virus, they can spread it to their family members, neighbors, and the community at large. For instance, social distancing is not possible in a Somali household. People share everything. This makes us more vulnerable.
However, despite all these challenges, the Horn of Africa nation has fewer cases compared to neighboring countries. But with frontline health workers already exposed to the virus, authorities have been urged to enforce drastic measures to contain a possible outbreak of the disease in Somalia. Abdulaziz Bilo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
And the news continues on Africa Live. We've got more news coming your way on the other side of the break. Here's a look at the headlines. Stay-at-home orders leads to a steep rise in domestic violence. And find out why mass polio immunization campaigns are being stopped in Nigeria.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to Africa Live. In Uganda, there is concern over rising cases of domestic violence. The country has been asking people to stay at home to limit the spread of the coronavirus. The UN warns that responding to these incidences is further straining police services on top of dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. Isabel Nakiria reports.
Joan Nachiranga walked out of an abusive marriage in June 2019. She suffered repeated physical abuse from her partner for 4 years. The violent relationship ended with acid being thrown at her, scarring her back and arms.
It was around 9:30 p.m. when I decided to go take a shower. I didn't know my husband had hidden behind the bathroom. As soon as I started scrubbing myself, he climbed up and poured the acid all over.
Now Joan regrets not leaving earlier. The case is still being heard in court and her husband is out on bail, but the trial has been put on hold due to the outbreak. For now, this rehabilitation shelter outside Kampala is helping her get her medical care. This shelter has remained open during lockdown period, and a few women who've managed to run away from abusive relationships are receiving legal care and counseling here as they recoup. Campaigners say they are overwhelmed by the number of cases reported every day during the coronavirus lockdown. This center received 28 cases in March, up from 17 in January. And responding to each case is especially difficult when there are added health considerations.
Even if I am to consider the calls, there are so many calls in a day. I receive over four calls, right from the survivors of violence reporting what they are going through down there in their homes, and also the referral pathway.
The UN warns poorer countries are most affected by the restrictions being implemented to combat COVID-19. In Uganda, the police say added stress from the outbreak is increasing problems within homes.
There are people who are at home and are not going to work. And some of them don't have savings to look at. So such a situation with the increased demands within the homes is bringing out a situation where there's increased tension.
The Ugandan police have had to form a task force to deal with domestic violence cases at a time when there is already high demand to enforce the lockdown. While the entire country is impatient for the outbreak to end, it's even more urgent for women like Joan. Her hope is that the lockdown comes to an end so that she can find justice. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
And to discuss this matter further, we are joined live by Grace Linda, a professional counselor from Kampala, Uganda. Grace, thank you for taking time to join us here on Africa Live. Let me begin by asking you, Grace, there has been a surge in cases of domestic violence amid the coronavirus pandemic. What are the main contributing factors for this?
I think we can agree that we went to bed in a different world and woke up in a completely different world altogether. So this pandemic, COVID-19, all over the world has actually stirred different emotions in all of us. There is fear, there is uncertainty, there is loss, there is anger, frustration, depression. All these things are emotions that have been stirred up in everyone, wherever they are, in their houses, at the workplace, whatever they are going through, wherever they are, these are different emotions that have been stirred up. Some of the, probably, I would say, the factors that have led to this increase in domestic violence, I would say, is probably uncertainty, fear of loss, fear of death, proximity. Proximity, because before we had an escape. We had somewhere I would go if I wanted to vent. I would call up a friend, I would meet up with probably a work colleague, or I would go to my parents' house. Now, under this lockdown, I'm restricted. So I would say some of the factors that have probably brought up to the rise of this domestic violence would be the confinement, that is proximity, where people actually do not know clear boundaries between my private space, my personal time, then quality time probably with the rest of the family. So proximity, fear of loss of a job, fear of death, fear of being infected, and probably anxiety, and people are bordering on the extremes of different behavior. We are being pushed to the wall to show our real side, our real self.
Well, Grace, we certainly appreciate those insights. Grace, for many families or couples who are now forced to stay at home for prolonged periods, what are the danger signs to look out for in the behavior of the ones they are staying with?
Okay, I would say, first of all, you have to be present. Very many of us are feeling like we need an escape. You think about all the things that you would have done if only you could get out. They're not looking at the things that you can do while you're in this lockdown, the constructive or productive ways you can live or adapt during this lockdown. Some of the things you can look out for, first of all, is probably irritation. If someone is not usually irritated by something or a conversation, look out for irritation or a discomfort in case you bring up a certain topic. Look out for withdrawal. If someone is a bit withdrawn, they are not as probably as expressive as they would have been. Look out for continued behavior on the extreme still. For instance, if someone was not drinking, probably if they were an occasional drinker, and now they've resorted to probably more beers in a day than they would have, or even that time that they actually start. Probably you could also look at the change of sleeping patterns, change routines. If someone was sleeping probably in the night and now they're sleeping the whole day, that could be a sign that there is something that this person is going through, and you need to tread very, very, very carefully. But most importantly, people need to live in the present.
All right, Grace, quite insightful. Irritation, being withdrawn, unusual drinking habits, and unusual sleeping patterns. But another worry during this period is the rate of suicide spiking. How should individuals tackle issues like anxiety, stress, and even depression emanating from fear and uncertainties brought about by the COVID-19? Grace.
I think first of all, people have to be informed. They have to keep up to date with whatever is going on all over the world. Watch the international news, watch the local news, so that you stay informed and stay up to date with what is going on. That is the first thing. The second thing that people need to do is to structure a routine. For instance, the people who are working at home, you need to establish a balance, a work-life balance between the time for work, productive hours, and then your pleasure time, maybe quality time with the family, and then maybe outdoor time or TV time. I think we are facing an issue where people are watching more of news, like from 9 a.m. From 9 a.m. to like 9 p.m. they're watching news, and the only news they're watching is about COVID-19. Yet you realize that the only information we actually need is, first of all, preventive measures, second, the symptoms of COVID-19, and maybe third, what do you do in case you actually get it? So the things that people need to do in order to cope is, first of all, the structure. Find a routine that works for you. Know when you're working, what time you're doing what and where. You can do the same for your children. Probably if there is homework or anything that they're doing, maybe you're homeschooling them, or probably you're giving them particular exercises, or there is probably a rota for work. There should be a structure so that people follow that and know what to do when and where. The other thing is, probably before, we used to do things like hugging and cuddling, and all those things used to release feel-good hormones in our system, in our bodies. Hormones like dopamine, hormones like oxytocin. But right now, that can be replaced by exercise. Exercising, it doesn't matter what you have to do. But if you exercise and probably sweat, these feel-good hormones will be released into your body, into your system, and probably will relax you. You'll be in a better mood, you'll be in a happier state. Yeah, those are some of the things that you can do.
All right, Grace, and finally, before I let you go, here's my final question. I believe we've got to get the authorities involved. What should authorities do to effectively handle mental well-being concerns during the coronavirus pandemic?
I think, first of all, they need to stop referring to the COVID-19 patients or people who have been affected or infected by the COVID-19 and have tested positive. I think, first of all, they need to stop referring to them as COVID-19 cases or COVID-19 victims. I think it's very important for us to separate between the COVID-19, the disease, and the person. People need to maintain their identity. So they probably could say that these people are being treated for COVID-19 instead of calling them COVID-19 cases. It will help with the stigma. That is the first thing. Second, they need to educate us, and this information has to come in timely. All over the world, World Health Organization is probably releasing authentic information, and that's the exact information that we should be getting from particular authorities, because there are different people who are coming up with different things, GIFs and memes, to mean different things. And I think there should be, a centralized system where we get authentic information.
All right, Grace, Linda.
Those are the main important things.
Grace,
and then also they could set up a psychosocial impact.
Let's leave it there for now, Grace. We certainly appreciate you talking to us. Thank you so much for spending time with us here on Africa Live. Grace Linda speaking to us live from Uganda. Moving on, Kenya's judiciary has instructed workers to stay away from courts in efforts to curb the spread of the coronavirus. Instead, they will be using a digital system and video conferencing. CGTN's Wilkerson Yabwa brings us this report.
Circumstances, Kenya's Supreme Court would be buzzing with activity as hundreds crisscross these corridors in search of justice. But not today. As Kenya grapples with COVID-19, Kenya's judiciary has decided to take its operations online. It is a new direction for Kenya's judiciary. After Kenya reported its initial cases of COVID-19, the Chief Registrar of the Judiciary directed members of staff to work from home in a bid to combat the spread of the virus. All work-related matters must now be processed virtually. Urgent matters can still be filed, but only through electronic means. These matters are now forwarded through email to judges and magistrates for uploading on the judiciary's website. Litigants are required to indicate their mobile telephone numbers and email addresses through which they will receive directions. Already a section of magistrates have presided over sessions and delivered orders through video conferencing platforms. These measures prevent the parties from coming into contact with each other as they usually would. For some, it is a welcome shift towards incorporating technology in the judiciary's workings.
I think it's a good thing because it helps curb the spread of the coronavirus. The government has urged members of the public to maintain a certain distance, and this is hard to do in court. This way, everyone will be safe at home.
1 meter apart. Others, however, feel the move has left a gap in the quest for justice.
Now we've been told you can come and lodge your claim through the digital platform. It's a welcome initiative, but is it working?
Nelson Harvey is the president of the Law Society of Kenya, representing the country's thousands of lawyers. Largely through them, every year about 400,000 cases are filed in court. The move online, he believes, is contributing to an existing backlog of cases.
What about cases that have arisen as a result of this pandemic? The justice system is very spontaneous. It's almost subsistent. Problems and disputes arise every day.
But for the technologically challenged, going online presents a new set of challenges.
It's a good idea but difficult to implement, especially among the elderly who might not be internet savvy. They will suffer. A court should be in a physical location where the litigants can state their case openly.
They suggest that the courts be reopened with adequate protection for judicial officers.
Courts must open. Judges must come and sit here. Let a judge or magistrate sit in chamber. Let the judge or magistrate be serviced by one clerk and one secretary and a maximum of 3 clerks at the registry. You see the fountain of justice. Water must continue flowing on the fountain of justice. The fish there, it must always be underwater. And it hasn't stopped. Why are we stopping it?
But for the time being, the judicial proceedings remain online. And litigants acknowledge that except in the most urgent matters, many will have to wait longer for their day in court. Wilkerson Yabwa, CGTN.
Meanwhile, mass polio immunization campaigns have been temporarily stopped amid the global coronavirus pandemic. Nigeria is close to being declared polio-free, having recorded no cases for over 3 years. Here is CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam with more on this story.
For decades, the World Health Organization and national health authorities have prevailed in the fight to eradicate polio globally. There's been over 99% decrease in cases globally, from 350,000 cases in 1988 to only 33 reported cases in 2018. Now, the World Health Organization recently suspended the fight against polio to focus on tackling the coronavirus pandemic.
Fighting polio is essential for the global health, but we have made a lot of gains in the fight of polio, and more currently, COVID-19 pandemic, it's claiming the lives of so many. And if you want to weigh the effects of the morbidity or illnesses and deaths coming from COVID-19, I think it's a very wise decision.
But polio survivor Esther Sunday is worried about the decision. Her life's been adversely affected, having lost her legs to polio at a very young age. Among several others, the graduate of marketing has faced intense discrimination in securing a job and a relationship, and it's not something she'll want to see trickle down as a result of WHO's decision.
If now they said they're going to withdraw it totally, I think polio will come back. And it's not our own wish for polio to come back, because we that are survivors, we know what we went through. So we wouldn't be happy to see, or I would not be happy to see younger ones still having this same problem that I've overcome. They should still create some percentage still for polio.
All house-to-house polio vaccination campaigns have been suspended. Vaccination generates immunity, but there's still a possibility new cases can arise. Afghanistan and Pakistan are the two remaining countries in the world that have yet to end the transmission of wild polio virus. Nigeria is waiting to be officially taken off that list, after which the entire African continent will be certified free of the disease.
We're at the verge of being declared polio-free. But we still have some countries like the Pakistan and Afghanistan that are still having polio virus transmission. And we know that the world is a global village. There is globalization going on. So to say that you are free in one side of the world doesn't really make you free, because if transmission is ongoing somewhere, then other parts of the world are at risk.
Polio is most common in children under 5. The highly contagious disease is caused by a virus that attacks the nervous system, resulting in paralysis and sometimes death. With WHO's decision now, health experts are advising the primary health care to be more alert in order to protect the gains made so far. And the main focus now is on continuous routine immunization. Kelechi Emekalam, CGT and Abuja, Nigeria.
Nigeria's commercial capital, Lagos, is now in the second week of a total lockdown. To help residents cope with the effects of the lockdown amidst this pandemic, authorities have opened markets that operate twice a week across the city, allowing residents to get much-needed food supplies. CGTN's Deji Badmans has been to one of the markets, and he filed this report.
So I'm right at the entrance of one of the COVID-19 special markets set up by the Lagos State government. Now, this is a market with a difference. It's actually a primary school that has been converted into a market and actually operates twice in a week. So let's see how the process works here, because it's not a market that you just come into and then walk straight in. Now, this is how it works. Wash my hands. Remember, I have to do this for like 20 seconds. So I'm now going into the market, actually. So that's just the way it works. You don't just come in. The market is a completely different picture from the usual everyday market in the city. The makeshift stalls are very well organized and laid out to allow for social distancing. Every trader here has been provided with a small canopy to display their wares. The rowdy situation you find in most markets in the city is absent here. But obviously, not everyone in the market observes the recommended 2 meters social distancing. And one more problem. Not every resident who comes here gets what they need.
We are here to get some perishables, and what we are seeing are just non-perishables at all. And what we are made to believe that when we come to the market, we get perishables, we get food stuff like yam, tomatoes. But now, there's nothing like that here.
But beyond that, the atmosphere at the market is very relaxed and calm. Authorities are hoping with special markets like this, they would be able to put a check on the spread of COVID-19 in a city which is the epicenter of the outbreak in Nigeria and has the highest number of confirmed cases. The markets are located in several neighborhoods across the city and are positioned to be within walking distance of residents.
The concept is okay. It's okay, very, very okay. I think they know what we want. What people need most are perishables. So I think what they should bring to the market is perishables. vegetables, tomatoes, pepper, onions. I think that maybe fish, all those things, and meat. So people will come to the market.
The concept of the market, it's very nice. I mean, the stalls are well spaced out, but then there are quite a number of stalls that are empty because the traders are yet to bring in their goods. They're still being inspected. And that is the reason why some of the shoppers here have not been able to get what they actually want, talking about those perishable goods. But then, no question at all that the concept of this market is well suited for the current situation now that Nigeria finds itself battling the COVID-19 pandemic. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Crossing over to Cote d'Ivoire, where several small and medium-sized enterprises are experiencing similar strain following the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Many businesses are forced to respond to financial pressure by reducing and even laying off some of their staff. CGTN's Beryl Ororo has that story.
Some small and medium-sized enterprises in Cote d'Ivoire are struggling under the weight of government measures to try and limit the spread of COVID-19.
Here at Guangxi Management, we help Ivorian businessmen to purchase their goods from China. And we help Chinese investors to set up shop in Cote d'Ivoire. But today, with COVID-19, we're seeing a decrease of 40% in our turnover. And this has a negative impact on our operating costs. We have made a provision of 6 months' salary, and today all our staff has received 2 months' salary and work from home. However, if this pandemic persists, we'll have no other choice but to go into unemployment or even reduce the workforce.
The impact has been felt hard in the industrial sector.
I have a staff of 30 employees with 10 other people we work with indirectly, making a total of 40 people. The current situation with COVID-19 is becoming more and more difficult, and we are considering whether to retain the staff or to put them on unemployment.
While rich countries are releasing significant funds to support their businesses, concern is growing about survival of businesses in less wealthy countries, especially those in sub-Saharan Africa.
Since last week, we've been working from home. For me, this is an opportunity to rest and enjoy with my family. But I pray that all this will come to an end soon, because if it continues, we might find ourselves on unemployment or even lose our jobs.
Currently, my company has reduced its staff. Some companies have even closed. I just spoke with my employer, and I've been forced to go on temporary unemployment.
According to Oxfam, the economic impact of COVID-19 in this part of Africa could cause a 30-year setback in the fight against poverty, and almost half of the workforce could disappear. Beryl Ororo, CGTN.
And we're not done just yet. We've got more news coming your way after the break. Here's a look at what's coming up. We tell you how players in the tourism sector in South Africa are deploying technology to counter lockdown conditions.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. It's been 2 weeks since South African President Cyril Ramaphosa initiated a nationwide lockdown in response to the coronavirus pandemic. Residents have adhered to the call of staying home, but many are missing the bush and its wildlife. Several game reserves are now offering virtual game drives. CGTN's Julie Shire spoke to Tin Swallow Safari Lodge guides and find out more. Let's take a look.
South Africa is home to some of the world's most famous wildlife reserves. The Big Five is one of the main attractions, drawing in millions of local and international visitors. But a COVID-19 lockdown has kept everyone home. Thanks to technology, Tsinswalo Safari Lodge now allows you to take a virtual game drive.
How does this virtual safari work? Explain to us how it works.
Myself and Alistair, we wake up very early every morning. We get up at about 5 a.m. We head out there. We generally have a plan what we're trying to look for. So if we want to look for lions, we want to look for leopards, elephants, we'll head into certain areas where we know there's a good chance of finding them. And then we'll head out for about 4 hours a day. I mean, what makes it exciting is we'll never know what we're going to see out there.
So to be able to go out into the bush, both of us super passionate about what we do, and just be with the animals that we really love and cherish, is quite an amazing thing that we've never been able to experience.
Can anyone see it from anywhere in the world?
Yes, that's correct. You can see it anywhere in the world. You can go onto our Facebook page, Tsinswalo Safari Lodge. We've got it on a YouTube channel, and it's also on our Instagram channels.
One of these days, there were about 6,000 people following the safari. Is that correct?
You're 100% right. We had one day, I think we had about 50,000 views, I think, on our first post. And then a lot of the posts are averaging in the thousands, some 5,000, 6,000. And then I think there's one now above 10,000 as well.
Neil and Alistair digitally transport safari lovers through the 27,000-hectare private Mageleti Game Reserve, with some even preparing for the drive.
As a family, we thoroughly enjoy the bush, and it provides a great escape for all of us. And what better way than to have a virtual safari right in your living room, and you see the most incredible things. You never know what's coming, and we all enjoy it hugely.
Wow. As safari addicts that are cut off from our fix, it's really the only way we can know what's happening. And for us that regularly go to the bush, it's like a continuation of the story that we already know. The big difference now is you're relying a lot more on the descriptions and explanations, and you're not distracted as much by the 360-degree view.
A lockdown is mentally challenging for everyone, but at least wildlife lovers can click on a button and continue to search for Africa's most wonderful animals. Judy Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
TikTok, the Chinese social media app, has become popular in Tunisia. Many families staying indoors are using the technology for fun, as well as to raise awareness during the coronavirus pandemic.
Thuraya has respected the general lockdown measures imposed by the state. She's spending this long period at home with her children. Acting, singing and recording videos for TikTok has become a daily routine. It starts with an idea, then it is developed and put into action by the whole family.
It's hard to convince children and youngsters to stay at home for weeks, but it is necessary. TikTok has made adaptation and life easier. We're creating digital content and sharing it with the world through this fantastic application. TikTok has brought us together with friends, followers and fans.
Cote is a rising star in Tunisia. The 10-year-old TikTok user is also a talented actor who urges people to stay safe while indoors.
We study and play video games, but TikTok is the most amazing daily activity. We must all stay at home and respect the rules until the end of the pandemic.
Celebrating Fatima's 9th birthday is a joyful event. The whole family is mobilized to produce a video on this special occasion. The child is often described by her fans as the princess who virtually escapes the lockdown through TikTok.
We are at war against the coronavirus. TikTok made me happy on my birthday because I was able to share happy moments with followers.
TikTok is one of the most popular apps among youths in Tunisia. It offers a variety of options and choices, from short lip sync, comedy and talent videos, especially during the general lockdown.
With millions of Tunisians staying home, social media usage has gone through the roof in the North African country. The Chinese short-form video sharing app has attracted more users of all ages who are downloading TikTok for fun and information on the coronavirus. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Welcome back. Let's talk a bit of football. FIFA President Gianni Infantino has warned against restarting football too early amid the coronavirus pandemic. He told FIFA's 211 member associations on Friday that